All right, folks, welcome. This is No Bones About Wrestling. I'm usually your host, Asa, but we're doing it a little differently tonight. This is your host, Kay Fabulous, and she's going to tell you what we're doing on this episode.
So rather than doing a wrestling show recap, we thought it might be interesting for you to get to find out some more about us. And so we're starting off with taking a look at Asa and how he got involved in wrestling in the first place. So I'm just going to do a little bit of an interview to get some of his backstory. So before we fully dive into your life story in regards to wrestling, let's get some context. So How old are you and where are you from originally?
I'm 39 and I'm originally from High Point, North Carolina, the former furniture capital of the world.
Have you lived in North Carolina your whole life?
I have. North Kakalaki.
In like the same part even?
In the Triad, yes. Okay, the Piedmont Triad, at the foot of the mountains.
Okay. You talked on your first episode about the first live show that you went to. How old were you when you first got into wrestling in the first place? And what got you into wrestling to start?
So I was 9 when I first got into wrestling. When I really got into wrestling, like I knew about it before then. I knew who Hulk Hogan was. Every kid knew who Hulk Hogan was. Mm-hmm. I mean, he had been in Gremlins 2. I knew he was a wrestling champion. I knew he was a big dude with muscles. That's all I knew about him, though, really. I knew he body slammed Andre the Giant. I knew that was a big deal. That's all I knew about wrestling, really. But how I got into it, I was at the beach, spending a week at the beach with my mother, and was just like flipping through the channels for something to watch. We were inside, obviously, and flipping through the channels for something to watch, and I came upon WCW, and it happened to be on Big Van Vader versus Cactus Jack, and both of these guys looked, different. It was interesting. I mean, it was different than anything else that was on the television, and it was the match where Big Van Vader powerbombed Cactus Jack on the outside of the ring. So it was, both these guys look like, superheroes, supervillains, whatever you want to call them, superhumans,
Yeah.
I mean, these were big dudes. And Big Van Vader, like I said, powerbombs Jack on the ring floor. So just to see a man absorbing that kind of punishment was kind of pretty shocking to my 9-year-old eyes, Mm-hmm. But I also kind of enjoyed it, obviously, too.
Yeah.
So it's a weird mix. I mean, wrestling's a weird thing when you get down to it.
Yeah, no,
it's a weird thing to like. I mean, anybody who really analyzes why they like it and what it is, it's a weird thing. Like, if you can't admit that, then I don't know. You got to get over yourself. Yeah. I mean, it's a weird thing. Grown men, and I'm not making fun of it here. I know people do it for a living. Obviously, it's their livelihood. But when you come down to it, it's grown men pretending to fight. Half-naked grown men oiling themselves up and pretending to fight. That's what it is. Now, that doesn't mean it's not interesting. That doesn't mean it's not, can't be classified as art, even, sometimes. Oftentimes, I would argue. But like I said, even at first, I knew it was kind of strange and kind of different. And that is kind of what drew me into it. It was different than anything I'd ever seen. The presentation and WCW was how I first got started watching. Was WCW 1993. And I remember, like I said specifically, it was Big Van Vader and Cactus Jack.
That's pretty cool that, like, your first show you remember watching was Vader and Jack, and the first show that you got to see live had Vader and Jack.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's pretty awesome. Mm-hmm. So, being from North Carolina, obviously, it's in the South. it's a big wrestling state. Did you have family members who watched wrestling, or was this like a solo activity for you for the most part?
I did. I didn't know it until I got into it and started talking about it more, but my aunt, I call her my aunt, she's an older cousin, Sandy. She was super big into wrestling. And when I got into it, she let me borrow, to her credit, she let me borrow a bunch of she had all the tapes, like all the old NWA Starrcade, like 83 through 89, and Great American Bash and NWA War Games tapes. I mean, the good shit. This is the Jim Crockett Promotions wrestling.
Yeah.
You know, old school wrestling. Which, when she let me borrow it, it was not my thing.
Oh, the old school stuff?
It was not my thing at the time. I was more into the 90s circus kind of, you know, the bigger performance aspect.
Like the bigger personalities?
The bigger personalities, yeah. I didn't like the, you know, here's whatever, Roddy Piper, and he's got tights and boots. And who's he fighting? Greg Valentine, and he's got tights and boots. And who's that over there? There's Ric Flair, and he's got tights and boots.
Yeah.
And, you know what I mean? Where everybody's dressed the same, everybody's got normal, quote-unquote, normal first and last names. It didn't do anything for me. You know, I like Big Van Vader, Cactus Jack, Sting, Sid Vicious.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of shit. British Bulldog, those guys. But I borrowed her tapes, and I kept them for way too long, I remember. Because by the time I got more into wrestling, I got around to watching them, trying them again, and then it was totally my thing, I found out. And I really appreciated them.
How old do you think you were at that point?
Probably say, yeah, not too old. I'd probably say 11. It was kind of the end of my first phase of wrestling.
Okay. I'll have to follow up with some questions about your various phases later on.
Yeah.
But as a child fan, when was it that you discovered that the outcomes were predetermined? And how did that impact how you viewed the events you were watching?
So I think, if memory serves me right, I think my parents, now I'd have to ask them, really, but I think my parents told me that it was predetermined because they wanted me to know that the violence wasn't real.
Okay.
That it was a performance.
Yeah.
Not a fight. I believe that's how it went down. And how did it affect how I watched it?
Yeah.
I don't think it did. I mean, I just enjoyed it it didn't affect it one way or the other. It didn't affect it one way or the other.
Okay. So I know you've already talked about your love of Mick Foley, but as a young child, who are some of your other favorite wrestlers, and what drew you to them, and these as your favorites in particular?
Give me a long list. You better have like an hourglass or something here. Am I on a timer?
Can you give me like top 5 when you were a kid?
Okay, top 5.
Well, here, let's do top 5 when you were a kid, top 5 when you were a teenager.
That's hard.
And go.
Top 5 when I was a kid. Cactus Jack, for sure. What drew me to him? I don't know. He was a weirdo. He was a fucking weirdo. Because the first angle I saw him in was when, like I said, he had been power bombed on the outside by Big Van Vader. He'd lost his mind. He was found on the streets of Cleveland. He thought his name was Captain something. Was it Captain Jack? I forget what the fuck it was. He was out of his mind, living as a bum on the streets of Cleveland. He was just a weird guy and cut weird promos and was missing some teeth, and always went bang bang, and he was just out of it. I didn't know till years later. Of course, I didn't know when I was 9 that he based part of that character on Charles Manson.
Oh, I didn't know that at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's who he was kind of channeling when he was doing his Cactus Jack thing, was Charles Manson.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so we got Mick Foley, or Cactus Jack,
I believe, I could be wrong, I believe in his early days he might have wrestled a time or two as, now somebody might correct me, I believe he might have wrestled a time or two as Cactus Jack Manson. I could be wrong about that.
That's weird, because he wasn't a heel at this point, was he?
When I liked him, no. I'm not talking about WCW. I'm talking about before that.
Okay,
before
gotcha.
1993.
I gotcha.
But who are my favorites? Number 1, Cactus Jack. Number 2, Lex Luger. Big time. Lex Luger. Made in the USA. Lex Express. I was all about Lex Luger. He was super patriotic, and I thought that was cool that he loved his country and wanted to beat Yokozuna, because I hated Yokozuna. I didn't hate him. I didn't hate him. I just didn't, he was a bad guy. I didn't like Yokozuna. I guess that's the way to put it. I didn't have hate in my heart as a 9-year-old child.
Yeah.
I didn't like him. He was a bad guy. But I loved Lex Luger. And I thought it was cool he was patriotic. Another big favorite for me when I was a kid, Tatanka. I'm from North Carolina, and they announced him as being he's from Lumberton, North Carolina, very near where we're from, the Lumbee Indians. He is of their descent, and so I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
There aren't, at the time, I didn't realize how many wrestlers are from North Carolina. I thought he was one of a couple. Little did I know that there are a ton of wrestlers from North Carolina. But yeah, Tatanka was definitely one. And I loved how he did his war dance. And he kind of did a Hulk Hogan thing, but instead of hulking up, he would start no-selling and start doing like a war dance around the ring. He would do a dance up, and do his war dance and be impervious to pain.
That's cool.
And yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. He was like drawing on the spirits of his ancestors to give him power, and I thought that was awesome.
Sweet, yeah.
So how many is that now? 3.
3.
4 would be, I know it sounds weird, because now one of my favorite wrestlers is Bret Hart, but when I was a kid, I liked Owen way more.
What about Owen? Made you like him more than Bret?
He was a high flyer.
Okay.
Bret didn't have any top rope moves at all. He has that middle rope elbow drop he does.
Yeah.
And that's it. But I liked Owen, and he did more high-flying moves in those days. He was part of the tag team called High Energy with Koko Beware. Koko Beware, who used to flap his wings like a bird and carry around a bird named Frankie. And they used to wear these baggy pants with red and green and blue and checkerboard patterns on them. Yeah, I thought Owen was cool because of the high flying. He mixed high flying moves with technical wrestling. And when Bret and Owen feuded, I was on Owen's side, actually, and I was cheering for Owen when he was a heel over Bret.
Wow.
So that's 4.
That's 4.
We need
you got one more.
Hulk Hogan, yeah, for sure.
Oh, really? Okay.
Hulk Hogan. I was a big Hulk Hogan fan as a kid. he was part of, like I said, he was part of what drew me into wrestling. Because, like I said, every kid knew who Hulk Hogan was.
Yeah, I mean, I knew who he was.
And he was in Gremlins, too, so
yeah.
he's got to be on my list. And one of the first wrestling tapes I got was Hulk Hogan's Greatest Matches. And I watched that so many fucking times, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about once you got, like, teenage years? You don't have to do 5 if you want to do, like, top 3.
Top 3?
Or do you need top 5?
I can do top 5 again.
Okay,
I can
top
do
5. Okay.
top 5 once I got teenage years, would still be Mick Foley. But I learned to appreciate him more. And he had more personalities now. Now he had been Cactus Jack. He'd been Mankind. He'd been Dude Love. You know, and we had gotten more of his backstory. Knew how much he loved wrestling as a teenager. And I loved it. So, like, my heart went out to this guy. You know, it was like me on the screen is how I felt about him. And I love the guy. Mick Foley, definitely, for sure. These are in no particular order. Number 2, Rob Van fucking Dam, for sure. That guy is awesome. Every second that he is on the screen, you're just fixed on him. He's electric. You know, one of the best wrestlers of all time.
He inspired one of your characters later on, didn't he?
Well, just the name.
Just the name.
Just
oh,
the
okay,
name.
okay.
I just like. Number 3, Ric Flair. Like I said, when I got older, I started to really appreciate the past of wrestling more, and so you can't appreciate the past of wrestling without appreciating Ric Flair. And what he's done for the business, and just what a career he's had, how long he's been on top, the dozens and dozens of legends that he's wrestled, beaten, and lost to. I mean, the man has had the most incredible career, probably of any wrestler. I mean, like I said, just not just the length of the career, but like I said, the length of the career, because other people have had careers just as long. Nobody has stayed like on top of the business at the main event level for as long as Ric Flair. That's the difference. Where he was still, he was still in main event matches when he was teaming up with the Evolution, with Triple H, Batista, and Randy Orton in WWE. Yeah, Ric Flair. So what's that? That's 3. Number 4, Bret Hart. Like I said,
You started to appreciate him?
Yeah, started to appreciate him. And I still loved Owen, but Bret Hart's better than his brother, for sure. But I started to appreciate Bret more. I mean, one of the best technical wrestlers ever. Bret is charismatic. He's not amazing on the mic or anything. He's not The Rock. He's not going to blow you away on the mic. But he's charismatic in the ring. He's charismatic with his body, which is weird to say at first. But, I mean, the force that, when he needs a rally, you can see him bringing the force behind his blows. You can see when he needs kind of a chant of, when he needs a chant, when he needs a cheer, when he needs the audience to get behind him, you can see him give more effort. When you see he's in pain, when you see him selling, when you see he needs your sympathy, like I said, his charisma lies in his body. He may be the best seller of all time, Bret Hart. I don't know if anyone can touch him. I would go as far as saying he's the best seller of all time. It's just exceptional at that, I think. So what we got? Hart, Flair, RVD, Mick Foley. Oh, fucking Stone Cold Steve Austin.
I was waiting to see, because I knew that you were a big fan of his. I was wondering if he was going to make the cut.
I think, I'm wearing a Stone Cold Steve Austin shirt right now, yeah. Stone Cold Steve Austin, yeah.
You're not wearing a Stone Cold Steve, but tell them what you're wearing.
I'm wearing a Cold Stone Steve Austin shirt.
It's him with some, ice cream cones.
Where, one of them is him holding, it's photoshopped, one holding an ice cream cone one, he's holding ice cream cones in both hands and has an ice cream mustache.
Oh, I didn't notice the ice cream mustache on
Yeah.
it. Interesting. So tell us why Stone Cold.
Stone Cold just raising hell and kicking ass, you know?
Yeah.
He's what got me back into wrestling.
Okay.
Because a friend was telling me, he's telling me about wrestling, and I was like, yeah, I'm sure it's fun. I was like, I've grown out of that. And he was telling me, no, dude, you don't understand. It's awesome now. He's like, WWF and WCW are both awesome. Every Monday night, they're both on, and they're both awesome. You can flip the channel, and both of them, you're going to see an awesome show. And Stone Cold is I was like, the Hollywood Blonde, Steve Austin, is the star, And he was like, yes, Stone Cold, Steve. I was like, Stone Cold? He was like, yeah, he's bald. I was like, he's what? Hollywood Blonde, Steve Austin is the star, and he's bald?
Yeah.
I was like, well, what are you telling me,
So when was this? Like what?
1998.
Okay.
1998. I kind of got out of wrestling in late 95 and got back into it in early 98.
So that was like your middle school years, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So how old were you when you decided that you wanted to get involved in the wrestling industry? And like what drove you down that path as like looking at it like a career choice?
Probably 1999. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm 15 years old. Just the more and more, in high school, I got into wrestling. Just obsessed with it. Just
Can you give us
obsessed with
like a peek as to what that might mean? You
I
being obsessed with it?
I watched Monday Night Raw. I watched Sunday Night Heat. I watched WCW Monday Nitro. I watched WCW Thunder. I watched ECW on TNN. I would buy every fucking WWF tape and WCW tape that came out. I bought every WWF, WCW for a while, and ECW pay-per-view that there was. Went to every show that came to Greensboro or Winston-Salem. And of my favorite at the time, Mick Foley, I made a notebook of every match that I knew of that he ever wrestled.
Like a log of the data?
Like a log, yeah, of the date, the place, the result of the match, who he fought, who won, if it was for a title, all that. So, yeah, it was just...
That's unusual.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, you know that.
Yeah. So now I'm going to get into some of questions about your actual experience with wrestling school in a bit. But I understand that you started your own backyard wrestling company with your friends. Correct me if I'm wrong here. As a high schooler?
As did a lot of people my age.
Mm-hmm. You were in high school at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to, can you tell me a little bit about how that idea came about and how it got started?
Well, first, we started one called BXW. And it was, well,
what does that stand for, BXW?
Beyond Extreme Wrestling.
Oh, okay.
So, me and a friend of mine were doing backyard wrestling with another group of guys, but they sucked.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of them did.
Yeah.
And we hooked up with this other group of guys who wanted to do backyard wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And so we said, hey, why don't we go and we'll do it with them. And so we did. We started doing it with them. And then I had these replica belts that I bought. Replica WCW and ECW title belts that I still have. In fact, I have the ECW heavyweight title, the WCW heavyweight title, the ECW television title, the WCW US title.
You have a hardcore title of one of them.
No, that's the ECW heavyweight title.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And several others. Those are the big ones, though. And so we would use those for the belts of the promotion. And so we did Beyond Extreme Wrestling. We did that for several years. And then, and it was very fun. And we would plan out the matches. We taped it just for our enjoyment, just so we could watch it back and enjoy it. And that was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. We did it at this church, their playground. We did it on Saturdays. We knew there was no one there, and we did it, and it was a lot of fun. Planned the matches, did angles, all that. Taped it, tried to make it like a wrestling show. Mm-hmm. Didn't do a ton of angles, but we did matches that were pre-planned and all that. And then we found out that Greensboro had public access television, which I didn't know. It was one city over from us. And so we decided to take it to... Did you have a question about that?
Yeah, I'm getting there. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll get there in a second.
Okay.
So within BXW, what were your like roles in the organization? Like, did you just do a little of everything, or did you have like a thing that like you were primarily responsible for?
No, everybody in BXW, everybody did their own thing. We kind of, it was like just catch as catch can. Nobody was in charge of anything. Mm-hmm. It would just be like, hey dude, you want to have a match next week? Yeah, okay. You know, mm-hmm. that was
Did
it.
You guys, like,
it was very casual.
So you didn't plan out like what was going to happen?
No, we did plan out what was going to happen.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
We did plan out what was going to happen. I'm just saying, as far as an overarching, there was no booker or anything.
Yeah.
We planned out what was going to happen. We flipped a coin to determine who would win.
Oh, that's cool.
Sometimes people would say, hey, I want to lose. Like they had something in mind, you know. They wanted to lose, maybe because they wanted to go after a different belt. Or they wanted to have like a storyline where they were on a losing streak or something like that. Sometimes guys were like, look, you can win, I want to lose. That didn't happen a lot, but sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But usually we determined it by flip of the coin.
Okay.
But there weren't any roles, no. Everybody just kind of, yeah, we would say, hey, so-and-so, you want to have a match? And then we would go and we would practice for about an hour and a half before the show and get the stuff down, get the spots down, and then we would tape it.
Okay.
Literally tape it. It was on tapes.
Yeah. So how did it go from being something that you and your friends did for fun, like in a church park playground, to ending up on cable access?
So like I said, I started answering that one.
Yeah.
We found out Greensboro had cable access, Cable 8 is what it was called. And we said, holy shit. And furthermore, we found out we could curse on it. We found out if we put it on late enough at night, we could fucking curse. And all we had to do was put up a disclaimer before the thing, you know? And we could curse. And holy hell. I forget what time it was. 11:30 we were on? It was 11:30 or midnight.
On what day of the week?
On Monday. We came in on Mondays after wrestling.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did that on purpose.
Yeah.
So people could watch Raw, and then stay up and then watch us.
So is this, you're still in high school at this point, or this is you've graduated?
We were still in high school.
I just find it so crazy that any high schooler would be like so motivated to do this, you know, like
yeah,
that's some drive and organizational skills, you know.
Yeah. Who says potheads aren't motivated? Yeah.
So what changes did you have to make to how you were running things in BXW? Because you changed the name also, right? Eventually.
Well, we changed it. Some of the guys, so the changes we made it a little more comedic. because we wanted it to be a little funny. And some of the guys did not have like a comedic bone in their body. They were totally against anything funny in BXW. So we dropped them.
Okay.
We did not bring them along with us. And so we wanted it to be more like a TV show, more like a wrestling TV show that you would see. So there had to be a writer, and so I wrote it. There had to be a booker for things to make sense. And so it wasn't just random matches from week to week, depending on who wanted to fight each other. No.
Yeah.
You had to have a plan. You had to have a story. You know, an overarching story.
Yeah.
And so I was the booker. I was the writer because it was my idea to do the show. And I already had a story idea for it as well. And so I wrote it. I booked it. I organized everything. I wasn't listed as the producer because I wasn't 18 yet. You had to be over 18 to be the producer. We got a friend of ours who was in college and was on the show. He was, technically, he was listed as the producer, but he was
producer in name only?
He was producer in name only, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
But I was director, editor, writer, booker.
So does that mean like the wrestlers weren't responsible for coming up with their own gimmicks, or did you let them have like input?
No.
Stuff?
They came up with their own gimmicks.
Okay.
They came up with their own gimmicks, and then I went from there.
All right. Did they each have like their own finishers and stuff too, or did it not get...
Yeah.
So it got pretty involved then.
Yeah, they came up with their own gimmicks and finishers. Like they got to come up with their personalities, gimmicks and finishers. And I went from there. I took it from there.
And how long did this go on, the PCW?
It didn't last as long as BXW. It lasted for a while. Lasted for a good year, I'd say. I'd say a year.
And I understand at one point there was a PCW movie in the works. Can you tell me a little bit about the plot and like how far you got in the process, and then what prevented the film from being finished?
There was. So the plot for the movie, not that anyone is going to know what the hell I'm talking about, but I'll give a general plot.
Yeah, general plot, yeah.
The plot was an old... I'm trying to remember now. Think how I can put it so where anyone understands what I'm talking about. An old washed-up wrestler... wants one more match against the head of PCW, the one who ruined his career. That's the
plot in a nutshell.
That's the plot in a nutshell. He wants revenge against the promoter who screwed him over.
Okay. How far did you all get in the movie making process?
Well, we wanted to film most of the scenes first and do the wrestling later, because we knew filming the wrestling like a movie was going to be a little harder.
Yeah.
So we shot most of the movie, most of these scenes, to where I'd say the movie is probably about 40% done, I would say.
Okay. So, is there any hopes of reuniting the PCW crew and finishing the film at this point, or it's going to stay at 40% for forever?
I would say there's a hope, but we'll see.
Okay. Are you still in contact with the guys that you...
Not all of them, no.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Most of them, but not all.
So what ultimately led to the end of the show? Like, was it the movie that like took over?
I think it's one of those things that just kind of petered out.
Yeah.
People's interests just kind of petered out. I think not everybody was eventually was as into it as I was.
Yeah.
Was as interested in giving as much of their time to it as I was.
Yeah.
Because shit, if it were me, we'd still be doing it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It would still be going.
That's cool. So did you go straight from the end of PCW into wrestling school? Or I'm just trying to get an idea of like the timeline. So
No, I was doing it while.
you were doing PCW while you were at wrestling school?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was after high school that you started wrestling school, or you started
Yeah.
wrestling school in high school? Okay.
Yeah. It was after high school.
Okay, I gotcha. What led you to eventually leaving wrestling school and your role as a manager there? Wait, before we get to that, tell me about wrestling school and
So I went to
yeah.
wrestling school. I always wanted to, well, not always, but for a while, for several years, I decided I wanted to do wrestling school. At first, I thought I had a chance. Like, so basically, I'm 5'8", and back then was probably 180 pounds. So, I'm not going to make it as a wrestler. No way. No chance. I have no physique. And at first I was kind of, telling myself, well, Spike Dudley made it. Maybe if I can do enough, I can be a Spike Dudley. Maybe if I can take enough bumps, I can do this, I can do that, I could be like Spike Dudley. But then eventually I said, no, I'm not going to be like Spike Dudley. So eventually I just said, look, it's something I want to do, so I'm going to go do it. So I went to wrestling school.
mm-hmm.
Just with the idea of, hey, I want to go do it. So I'm going to do it.
So not like a career choice, just like this is going to be fun, I'm going to go do this.
Yeah.
Because it's something I love.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha.
Right. And so I went to it. I went to it through the organization New Dimension Wrestling, which was one of the larger independents in North Carolina back then. The Hardy Boys, actually, they wrestled in it before they went to the WWF. And I was trained by Willie Clay, Dynamite Willie Clay, who wrestled in the NWA back in the day. You probably never heard of him, but he definitely lost to some people you have heard of. But he was a good trainer, nice guy, redneck, through and through.
So, but for people who haven't been to wrestling school, like, what does that even mean? Like, what does that entail, wrestling school?
Sure. So the first thing that we did is said hi. First thing we did, I'm trying to think. The very first thing we did is started with a collar and elbow lock up. Which if you see, it's think of the term lock up or tie up. That's what we started with. That's the basics of wrestling. That's the first thing we did was practice that. Moving into each other to a lock-in motion to where we're locked in with each other. We did that a lot. And then we started practicing doing that into each other while moving around the ring. Mm-hmm. And locked in to each other, moving with each other. You're kind of dancing with each other, if you want to look at it that way. So it looks
like you're like pushing each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Gotcha. So it looks like you're struggling with each other, but it's a give and take, really. But you make it look like a struggle, right? And then after that, they made us fall on our backs many times. I don't remember how many, but many times. And they teach you how to fall on your back properly. So you fall on your back with your back flat, your palms flat on the mat, your the bottom of your feet flat on the mat as well, or you might break an ankle. That's a common injury. One of the most common injuries you'll see in wrestling schools will be foot injuries, because people will want to tuck their feet kind of try and catch themselves when they're landing out of a body slam or whatever, some kind of fall. They want to try and, it's a natural to kind of want to catch yourself on your feet while you're falling. But yeah, you don't do that. You know, you fall with the bottoms of your feet on the mat. So the idea is that the bottoms of your feet and your palms and your butt will absorb most of the impact.
Yeah.
And so that the minimum impact is on your spine. And of course, you want to keep your head up, your head and your neck up, so that you're not hitting your head on the mat.
Yeah.
And we did that many times. And the next thing that we did is they had us run the ropes, which if you've never been in a wrestling ring, which I think is probably the majority of listeners, if you've never been in a wrestling ring, those ropes, they don't fucking bounce. Those are not bouncy ropes. Those are, you've probably heard the announcers talk about how they're steel. Those are fucking steel. That you run into those, you're going to fall. Most of us will fall. You have to make your bounce, so to speak. You have to run into them hard enough to make them move, to make it look like they move, by actually moving them. Running into them hard enough to where it shows that they move. And then run back the other direction. They're not bouncing you at all. You have to make this movement yourself. It's all in how you position your arm when you're putting it over the rope. You have to position your arm in such a way that it looks like you're bouncing off the ropes, when in actuality, you're not bouncing off the ropes at all. You're just making contact with the ropes. And we did that, and then they started having men drop in front of us so that we had to jump up, jump over them while we were running the ropes. And they did that until I vomited.
Did you vomit in the ring?
No.
Oh, that's
no,
good.
I got out of the ring, thankfully. Yeah.
Was it just from so many impacts of the ropes against your ribs? Do you think that
no, I was just, as they call, blown up. I had reached the extent of my physical abilities.
Wow.
I mean, I had no more running left in me.
So was it at that point you were like, I'm going to be a manager?
Nope.
No. Okay. So it hadn't broken your spirit yet.
Mm-mm.
So when did you decide to become a manager?
I think it was after about the third week, when my back started to hurt, is when I said, let me just do the manager part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Because there were two other guys I was in the wrestling school with. One was about my height, but was built like a little stock little athlete. And one guy was an athlete. Looked like he had a chance at it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the three of us in. And so I said, go and eventually, like I said, after when my back started to hurt, that's when I was like, I'm not going to be a wrestler. I'm not going to finish the wrestling training.
Mm-hmm.
But I will do the manager training because I do want to be a manager. I do want to get something out of this.
Yeah.
So I said, look, take them and focus on them. I don't want to take away from their training. Focus on them and do the manager training with me instead.
And what was your name as a manager?
Shane McFly.
After Marty McFly?
After Marty McFly.
Okay,
yeah.
fair enough. And do you have like a gimmick?
I did. So my gimmick basically was like a spoiled little rich kid. I had long hair at the time, so I slicked it back, put it in a ponytail. I wore a tie with $100 bills on it, and I wore a suit, and I carried a cane, and was just a stuck-up little irritating rich kid. That was my gimmick.
So what led you to leaving wrestling school and your role as a manager?
Say what?
Like, so you're not managing anyone now, right? So what made you eventually stop?
Oh,
being a
the
manager?
company stopped doing shows.
Okay, so you would potentially still be doing it to this day if they had not shut down.
Yeah, the company stopped doing shows. And I hadn't been working in the industry long enough to develop any contacts. Mm-hmm. I did 3 shows with the company, and it was a blast. It was one of the most fun things I've done in my life, easily.
That's cool.
And I did 3 shows, and I wish I'd done more. And it's something I'd like to do again. But I didn't, like I said, I wasn't in it long enough to build any contacts. So I was left with nothing at that point.
Yeah. So you obviously never fell out of love with wrestling, but can you talk us through what led you to your wrestling hiatus and like about how long it lasted and then what ultimately brought you back?
So the first one was when I was in middle school. I'm not sure it was, just trying to be cool. You know how you get awkward in middle school?
I'm very familiar.
And you're trying to be hip and cool and go for girls and whatever. And I knew wrestling was not cool, so that was what that was about. And then by high school, I was like, who cares, you know? And then the second hiatus was I was in college and I was just too busy, you know. I was trying to do a band and this and that and political clubs and everything else. I did not have time. I didn't watch any TV.
Okay.
No one doing anything. You know, I wasn't watching anything, much less wrestling. Yeah.
So did you start back up like as soon as you got out of college, or like what brought you back to wrestling?
I'm trying to think. Trying to think what did bring me back. What did get me back into it? Because I got out of it for quite a while, actually.
Well, I think you got out of it when I was getting into it for the first time. Because I think the period I know is the period you're the least familiar with.
I got out of it for quite a while. Oh, I'll tell you what got me back into it was Matt of Dinosaur Dracula and Jay of Sludge Central would be talking about WWE. And I'd be like, those guys are watching it. Maybe it's all right again, you know?
Yeah.
Because I had, every now and again, I would peek in on the product, just for my curiosity's sake.
Yeah.
Because I know wrestling, it has ebbs and flows. There are times when you're interested in the product and times when you're less interested. And, but when I heard that those guys were watching it, I said, well, if they're watching it, it must be good. And yeah, that was correct. Yeah, they were watching it and the product was good. And so I got back into it. And now, after I've been watching it again for I don't know how many years now, I wouldn't see stopping again ever, because just how much joy it's brought me.
Yeah.
You know, I watch it in a different way than I've watched it before. It's so nice having the WWE Network too. I love just having that around. Huh?
Well, now it's Peacock.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, you mean like having access to like the old shows and stuff, you mean?
Yeah, that's so great.
So my final question. How would you describe professional wrestling to someone who has never seen it before? Like, in a way that you feel like does it justice, but also is accurately explaining what it is.
It's a very hard question.
Yes, it is.
That's a very hard question.
That's why I'm ending on it. I'll make some clever edits here, so if you want to take the time to think about it, you can.
So Shakespeare, we look at Shakespeare now, you know, as being, people think it's hoity-toity, but Shakespeare really was written for the common man back then. That's how the common man spoke back then. Kind of.
Without the iambic pentameter.
Well, without the iambic pentameter, yeah. Those are the words that the common man used, just arranged in a different way. So I would say it's like taking a Shakespearean War of the Words and War of the Fists, and putting it in a theater on the round, live, once a week for the masses to come and cheer it or boo it as they may. And I mean, there aren't many things that are more exciting than that, and that's part of what makes it so electric, is that for every Shockmaster, there's a Kenny Omega. You know, for every gobbledygooker, there's a Rock. You know, there's the good. There's the extremely good, like Rob Van Dam. There's the extremely bad, like Giant Gonzalez. You know, when you have so much content to put out for the masses, and the masses have the ability to judge it, it makes it just makes it very exciting. And like I said, that's what Shakespeare was doing back in his time, was putting out these things putting out this art to be judged. Just our art now is a bit different. But as I said, this is no different. These men and women are wearing costumes. Just like in Shakespeare, they wear costumes. They're competing with one another. They have lives and drives in the story, just as they have lives and drives in a play. It's no different. So I think people simplify wrestling far too much, because as we know, there are characters who have been forged over 40 years, like a Ric Flair. You know, you say Ric Flair, you hear that name, and if you're a wrestling fan, that name brings a lot of baggage with it. Your mind instantly goes flashing back over 40 years. You know, your mind sees him as an old man, your mind sees him as a young man, in alligator shoes, in the fine suits, or sees him as an old man now with his daughter. I mean, so these characters, like I said, are forged over these years. And some people, like Ric Flair, keep the character up for 40 years. Or Hulk Hogan, keep the character up for 40 years. And the characters keep reappearing for 30 years or 40 years. And then some are around so for a far shorter period of time, but make a giant impact. Say The Rock was around for whatever it was. I don't know how long he was big in WWE. Say 10 years. And then he's gone. Off to Hollywood. But I got away from your question, but my point is, it's entertainment.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I guess really to really hit the nail on the head, it's to really simplify it. Yeah.
No.
I really got off there.
No, I enjoyed the ride. So, on behalf of Asa, this is Kay Fabulous for No Bones About Wrestling. Thanks for meeting and talking with me today. It's been very interesting, even as someone who knows you, getting to hear more of your story and your history with wrestling. So tune in later this evening for our Dynamite recap.
Yay, yay.
And in the words of Mick Foley, have a nice day.